The topic of this session is inside and outside museums, and I've reinterpreted this to the problem of center and periphery in museums. Because if we look at the museum tradition, it's a question very often of bringing relics, objects, artifacts from the periphery to the center, from the original habitat of the object to the centralized museum and put it on display. This has been practiced for millenniums. In 70 BC, Cicero prosecuted the former governor of Sicily, Verres, because he just looted the whole of Sicily for art objects and put it on display in his home in Rome. And you see here from the Arch of Titus, you see the menorah from the temple in Jerusalem. It was brought to the center, that time center, which was Rome, and put on display in Titus' triumph. And here is the more typical former kind of collection you see in old forms of museum, and maybe the most famous of all the objects that been put on display in a centralized museum far away from its original environment, the Elgin marbles in the British Museum, which the Greeks are still, although they have their new Acropolis Museum, they're still waiting to get the Elgin marbles back to Athens. So we have a problem because something is taken from its original habitat and put into a museum context, and that's good in one way because it's gathered, it's collected, it's taken care of, it's curated, it's maintained, it's put on display where a lot of people can watch it, and so on. But on the other side, the original habitat, the original environment, is deprived of its objects. And the original habitat, that's where the context is. So we have this, so in the extended context of notion of text, we have the object and the text is brought to the museum, to this artificial environment, but the context remains in the local or in the periphery. In Norway, for instance, we have a typical example of that. We have the beautiful Oseberg Viking ship, which is on display in Oslo, but then we have the mound, which is reconstructed just 100 kilometers south of Oslo. And that's the original habitat of this beautiful object. So how can we use digital technology to sort of mend this problem, to create a solution where we can bring something back to the original environment? And that's what we have been doing in the project I've been working on for the past 6 years, is trying to use location-based media, use tablets and smartphones and a sensor fusion approach so that we can bring the original digital copies of the objects that's in the museum back to the original environment. So that's a way of bringing it back and making sense and providing more meaning and context to the original environment. But it's also possible when you have a recreation like this of the like we did with the Oseberg Viking ship, where you have a reconstruction of the ship as it was in the year 834, just before the mound was erected on top of it, where we reconstructed this, and you can use the phone on site as a window to this past version of the environment. It's also possible to bring this environment into the museum context, so that you can share this virtual environment between the original environment and the new environment of the museum. So we are now in collaboration with Intermedia at University of Oslo. We have been testing different versions of indoor positioning systems, so that we can use the same simulation inside the museum as we use on the original in the original environment. And but there's still some limitations to indoor positioning. I'm sure many of you know, because that's something we want to have, everybody. But there is a lot of opportunities coming with the development of the technology. I think a third version of this relationship between center and periphery is where you have the original environment. There might be no specific museum which contains or stores the artifacts from this environment, but you have a very rich environment. You have a very rich local place, and you have several layers in that place. So we have a kind of what I would call a palimpsestic place, because you have traces of various periods in the same location. So we have one of the typical locations for this is the Roman Forum, where we have developed what we call a situated simulation. So here we walk into the forum using an iPhone with a sensor fusion approach. So we have a virtual environment, a virtual 3D reconstruction of the forum, so that when we move the phone in any direction, or we move ourselves, it is upgraded on the screen, so that you see the similar thing. In this way, the phone sort of works like a window to the past, to say it. Here's another example. It's in front of the Temple of Julius Caesar, where we can send the camera, the virtual camera, into the museum, because you can't walk in because you have the remains. So we're overriding the GPS, but we still use the sensors for tilting and panning, so we can stand outside the temple, and you can look around, you can look up and down, but we are overriding the GPS. But maybe the most palimpsestic of all places is the temple in or the Holy Mount in Jerusalem. Today we have the mosque, the Dome on the Rock, but in this specific location there has been several other constructions. For instance, the Roman temple of Jupiter, built by Hadrian, and the Jewish temple built by, or rebuilt by, Herods. So in this simulation we tried to show how one place is occupied over time by different buildings, different ideologies, different religion, different contexts, and particularly in this at this very contested place, we also made an interface where, in the opening of this simulation, it's fading between all three versions of the Holy Mount. So it's fading between the Dome of the Rock, the Muslim version, the Jewish version, and the Roman version. And here's another example where we used the fly-in function. As a non-Muslim, I cannot enter the Dome of the Rock, but I can send my virtual camera into this site, or into the inner part of the mosque. So here's a rock. According to some interpretations, this depression here is exactly part of the holiest of the holy in the Jewish temple, and also the position of the ark. That's according to one interpretation. But that was very convenient for our notion of palimpsestic places to use that specific theory to sort of show the possibilities of this kind of simulation technology. I think I should just give you another example, more a live version. I still have some minutes. So we have been, this is not going to be easy to both use. Sorry. So this is another example from Crete. We developed a simulation here from it's from a version of the city of Phalasana from 300 BC during the reign of Alexander. And here's an example of moving in time. Because this used to be a fortress, a fortified harbor in the 300 BC, but it developed into a pirate harbor during the Roman period, and it was eventually attacked by Pompey in 69 BC. So we have tried to make a timeline here so we can move from 333 and to 69 BC, where everything looks much worse because it's they are pirates, so it's the weather is bad and everything. And we have so we can use, for instance, the bird view, look inside the harbor, and what we experimented with here was to create, try to see if this kind of environment could contain action and events. So we tried to recreate very, very elementary the attack of Metellus Creticus. You can see that the Romans are over here. You see they're starting their attack. You can see the ballistica. So if we move inside the harbor now, there's some artifacts here. You can see that oh, I forgot to put on the. Okay, so you can see that we can have some form of action. Unfortunately, you see there is some flickering here, and that's just because I'm using the latest version of the iPhone, and it hasn't been upgraded for that version. And then finally, just the last one. This is the Oslo Opera. Now we're not talking about simulating the past. We're talking about simulating the future. We have been working on a project about climate change. So if this is the opera, you might have read about or seen images of the opera in Oslo. It's a beautiful place. But what would it look like in the future, in 2121, for instance? So we're underwater, and the whole thing looks very different. It's a dystopic version of Oslo. But it's just an example of future archaeology. Thank you.